Hey everybody, you're here for SideQuest Sessions. My name's Sean and this is our creative director, Joe McGrath.
What's up, everyone?
Today we're going to talk about video game collector's editions. And just a quick refresher on who we are and what we do. Our company's called WAYPOINT. We work on 3 different things exclusively in the video game industry, and those are creative, collectibles, and e-commerce. And today we're going to touch on the collectibles department. All right, Joe, so like I said, we're going to talk about video game collector's editions. And one of the first things I was thinking of talking about was, why do they even exist? And I think that with the advent of digital downloads and digital distribution, we have a lot less stuff to touch and hold and cherish and collect. And that's one of the major appeals of video game collector's editions. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think less physical media, people really want to own a piece of it for themselves. And I think it's also a lot about servicing the fandom, right? We have these super fans, they have their favorite games, and it gives publishers a way to kind of give them something back, right? And let them have a chance to own a piece of this part of history, this game.
As far as our customers are concerned, it gives something a little more to a standard release. You can, instead of releasing a game in a standard jewel case, you can have a premium edition, a standard edition, a collector's edition, and so on. And it gives somebody who's really passionate about the game a little extra to go for, right?
Absolutely, and they come in all shapes and sizes. You know, sometimes there's a day one or a launch edition that's just a little something extra with some smaller collectibles, and then they range all the way up to giant statues or weapon replicas from your favorite franchise.
For sure. And on the business side, we can drive a little more excitement. It's something to talk about. It's another marketing beat for the game publisher to release before the game comes out, something for them to build some hype up to the release. And also gives more purchasing options. Like, instead of buying just the standard edition, you can go ahead and get the premium edition, and you'll have some kind of exclusive item that maybe is limited in number and makes the whole thing feel a little more special.
Yep, the different platforms, different places you buy from, even like we see with GameStop or Walmart, having a little extra upgrade with your purchase. So it gives a variety of buying options, like you're saying.
A lot of the times, what I used to see in the past was digital items. You could come with a card or an extra skin for the game. But I feel that the more the time has passed, the more importance we've been attributing to having something exclusive and special that we can hold in our hands. So there's everything from physical items that could range from an art book to a figurine, soundtrack, cloth maps. I mean, you name it. We've done all kinds of stuff. What are some of the most memorable things you've worked on?
Let's see. So I really loved the Scorpitron statue we did for Wasteland 3. It's an incredible sort of enemy that we did in a diorama scene, standing on top of a bunch of rubble from the Wasteland. That one was amazing. And we also got to do some short runs of that with just an all chrome paint job or all gold paint job. So that was a really fun one. We did an amazing mask replica for We Happy Few. That was really cool. That came with its own stand for display. I definitely think it's a combination of figurines, but also sometimes like the crazy alarm clock that we did, or other sort of household items that we turn into something from the game world. It's a really fun opportunity.
Yeah, and one of the most relevant type of items is one that's based on an item in the game. So the alarm clock for We Happy Few was an item that you could find or encounter in the game. And that really is something that fans seem to appreciate the most. More than just making a figurine of the hero, a lot of those supporting items or secondary items are really neat too, because we can find them in the game, and it's bringing part of the game to the real world.
Definitely, like replica weapons, or we did a few grimoires or spell books from different franchises. Like, I think those also speak to the fans as well, and if done well, can be a standalone centerpiece to a collector's edition like this.
All right, let's talk about packaging, because all those cool items need to go into something, don't they? Not only is packaging used to get the items to you safely, but it's also in our opinion, I think, pretty important to make a good first impression on when you get that item in the mail or at the store, and you have something to open up. The first impression counts, right?
Yeah, completely. So it has two important components, right? One is the shipping, like you're saying, we need to protect the items, but also packaging contributes a lot to the experience of the unboxing, which is huge for collectors. And yeah, working on packaging is definitely one of my favorite parts of the process.
What's some of the cool packaging we did? I know we mentioned the In Exile or Microsoft CE we did. It had a pretty cool box, didn't it?
Yep, that one, the exterior, it sort of looked like a package that was shipped and all beat up through the mail with a little string tie on top. And then it had postcards from the varying areas. And when you lift off that outer sleeve, you see this inside package that's meant for you, like coming from the Wasteland itself.
We also did a cool, that was an influencer kit, but it was almost at the level of a collector's edition for Blizzard not too long ago. And that had a really neat box with the gears cut out.
Oh yeah, that one. So we did some die cut on the paperboard exterior that looked like gears and had a really intricate design. That was all done with laser cutting. Very cool. And then that one even had an acrylic cube on top that was part of the packaging, which housed the figurine. So right when you unbox it, you already see the figurine displayed on top.
So it's up to you and the team to come up with those cool packaging ideas. You know, how do you do it, or what's the process, or how do you come up with something like putting an acrylic cube and die cutting gears out of the front of the box? Or
yeah, definitely. So that's, like I said, that's one of my favorite parts. We do a lot of research online, looking for inspiration. So it's about kind of the experience that the person's going to get and kind of displaying the item in an awesome way when you first see it. So yes, there's an element of protecting the item with things like inserts or foam blisters, but really it comes down to just making a bunch of mock-ups and thinking about the way the items are going to be removed, or what's the first sort of touch point for the user. So maybe when they open the lid, there's a welcome note, or there's a message from the developer, and then there's little trays that they can take out, and piece by piece they sort of get down to the core of it, which is usually, you know, your centerpiece, so which could be a big statue, which could be some sort of replica, some sort of glass sculpture, whatever it's going to be. That's at the root of it.
do you think that packaging influences the perceived value of the collector's edition?
Absolutely. So when you're going through this process, picking your materials is essential. There are some where we use more of just a plain corrugate because yes, you can print it in color and the design shines, but definitely more cost effective, all the way up through the laser cut paperboard like we were just talking about. I mean, those kinds of nice gift boxes feel smooth when you remove the lid. We include ribbons, we include premium paper stock. All of those things definitely affect perceived value, and I think can set you apart, especially if you're working with smaller quantities. You might want to look into upping your investment on the packaging a little bit.
Okay, let's talk about what goes inside those CEs, as we call them.
Mm-hmm.
What's the approach that we take to capture the magic of the game so that we can have a collector's edition that's not only perceived as valuable, but also highlights the magic of the game? So
yeah, a couple of things we look at. I think number one would be characters, right? Like, is this a long established franchise? Is it new? Is there something recognizable? And usually you find a lot of that in the characters. I mean, they have great outfits, great accessories, great items. And so basing something around a character is always a great idea. But additionally, I think just the fan community itself, right? If you look online in discussions, we're always hanging out in the YouTube comments or trying to follow the fans and what they really appreciate about the games. Like for Metal Gear, for example, there's a lot of things that you wouldn't expect that people love about it. From Snake's box to like their specific items from the game that they use and appreciate, or maybe it's like side characters as well, or the group of villains. I mean, there's a lot of things you can play off of, and that could even split into different editions, for example.
Yeah, recently we did a piece for PUBG. That wasn't a collector's edition, but it had a strong environmental element to it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just about the figurine. We use environments as well as just the characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like a diorama sculpture is generally what we call that. And for that one, it was really cool because the announcement was focused around this new level kind of DLC environment. And we created our own little slice of that world that we brought to life in 3D and even added some LED lights on there too.
All right, so our job at WAYPOINT is to not only design these things, but also make them and even get them to their final destination.
Correct.
So what's the process that we follow when we make a collector's edition from start to finish? So I'll kick it off with coming up with the design mock-ups. So they're kind of pre-beauty shots where we mock everything up to give the customer an idea of what it would look like in the end. And this helps us narrow down the path that we're going to take for the collector's edition items.
Exactly. So first there's like some magic with our mock-ups involved, and it's also the science part of it, which is looking at your audience, looking at the fans that you're speaking to. And once you get a good grasp on that, thankfully we're able to iterate quickly with our wonderful 3D team and all the artists on our team. They can really cook up different packaging designs, different ideas for the main item, show it all together in a nice like beauty style shot. And I think that helps us nail down the approach. Maybe one is more playing to the magic side of things. Maybe one is more combat focused, right? We like to show a variety in those first mock-ups we deliver to the client.
So after we do all the mock-ups and get everything out on late on a Friday night, there's a few more steps involved to make a collector's edition. So what happens next?
So then we have to make sure that all the awesome things that we dreamed up are actually possible to make in real life, which is definitely an important part of the process. We work with our manufacturing team. We share schematics, measurements, materials that we want to use, and they're able to give us pricing depending on which quantity we're targeting.
So after we figure out that we can actually do these things we've suggested we're going to do, we need to see how much they're going to cost. We can't do something that's cost prohibitive. And so part of the process at that point is coming up with an estimate or a detailed cost sheet, as we call it.
Right. So that estimate includes everything from the actual item production to samples to master cartons to carry the goods across the ocean to shipping and duties. We really hit every part of the process and try to make sure we're covering everything, because this is a long form project, usually over the course of 6 to 8 to 12 months. So we want to make sure that with each step we've covered all of our bases.
Okay, so we've got mock-ups, the customer's set on an idea, we are all in agreement, we've done a quote, the pricing's great, everybody agrees. What happens after?
So after that, we're ready to go. Once we get sign off, we start with the prototyping process, which is bringing these designs to the real world. Maybe something's not working in real life. Maybe the branch on the tree isn't balancing properly, or we need to add more weight to the base to make sure that the item is stable. Those types of things all get worked out in the prototyping process.
Okay, so hopefully by now we've made a timeline and we haven't fallen too far behind our estimated timeline dates.
Correct.
So we've got a timeline, we've got the cost sheet, we've got the mock-ups, we started working on the prototypes. Let's say we produce one prototype for each item, then it has to get approved, and then what happens after that?
So there are a few rounds of that, but yes, we send physical prototypes from our manufacturing facility to ourselves to review in person, feel the actual quality of materials, and then we ask for feedback. That's the next step.
And so we'll go back and forth depending on the type of customer or even the type of dev studio that we're dealing with, because that's something we didn't talk about yet, but we work a lot with game publishers, but there's usually a game developer involved and it's their baby.
Right.
And so we'll have to deal with an art director or creative director on the other side who has his or her own opinions of what things should look like and so on. Okay, so everything goes marvelously. We got the prototypes approved. Then we have to make what's called a pre-production sample. It's the kind of sample that we'll usually get if we have time, and we'll send physically to the customer to approve or to give a last round of feedback on. That's the pre-production sample. After that, we work on proper production run samples, which you could consider being the first off the assembly line.
Correct. Yep. So there are three sort of samples that we look at in the process. The first is a prototype. That one's usually rough around the edges. Maybe it doesn't have color. Maybe it's just showing the die line of the packaging cut out to us and flat proofs of the printing. Then the second one is the pre-production sample, like you're saying, where we try to iron out anything that was incorrect on the prototype. It's looking more and more like the final thing. And then the production sample is the first off the assembly line. So once you're at that stage, you don't want to make any major changes, and you want to give the okay to see it through mass production.
So we're producing the production samples, and usually those are being sent at the same time as we're just doing the whole production run. So let's say we're making 10,000 units of something. We're in the process of making those 10,000 units.
Yeah.
Where do we make most of those things?
We make most of them in China with our, WAYPOINT manufacturing team. They are used to doing a variety of items, anything from resin statues to molded plastic to mini desktop items, fabric, paper, you name it. They've worked with the material, so they're really great on the engineering side to help us establish, what our specs are and make those samples.
And towards the end, we start kicking into gear with regards to printing. And so this could be if we're making an art book, or if we're making a lithograph, or any kind of printed graphic, as well as the packaging, right?
Yes, exactly. So paper stock is something we love to get samples of and think about, what's going to make this feel premium, what's going to make the art pop off the page. So we definitely get to see all that stuff in real life, and a lot of samples of just the raw materials get sent back and forth between our manufacturing team and our guys over here.
And so one of the less sexy things to deal with is what we call compliance testing.
Yes.
A lot of the times, customers and their legal departments have requirements with regards to compliance. So how does that go?
So yeah, we want to make sure that our supply chain and manufacturing is not putting out anything dangerous into the world. And there's a bunch of really important safety checks that we need to do to make sure our products comply with the standards of whatever territory it's going to be sold in.
All right, so all the items are tested. They all pass the compliance testing. They've all been manufactured. It's time to assemble them. And that's a big word, which means a lot of different things and can sometimes be simple, but sometimes be a little tricky. And so when we say assembly, it's the act of taking the premium item and all the supporting items and packaging them up in what we refer to as the retail box. After the items are all assembled, they have to get from where they are, which is usually overseas, over to us in our warehouse. What happens then?
Okay, so then once they're finished at the factory, then they're going to the port for pickup. So we work with a couple different freight forwarders to plan out the path of our finished collector's editions to their final destination. So the first stage of that is getting it to the port for being loaded onto the ship. So usually these are traveling overseas on freight ships, I guess you call them. And so there's a little bit of coordination with a freight forwarder who helps plan the schedule of when those boats are leaving from China to Los Angeles or to any of the other ports in the US. Then it's on the ocean, usually for about 6 to 8 weeks. It arrives at the port. There's a customs clearance process that happens there where they check the goods and make sure that it matches what you say that you're importing. And then the last step is usually by rail or truck to get it to its final destination, which is either our warehouse over here or the client's warehouse, where it gets distributed eventually to retailers or directly to customers.
So it's our job to get the items there, make sure they comply with all rules and regulations, even those of the importing government or state that we work in, right?
Yeah, and the freight forwarder really helps out with that, but we are managing sort of paperwork at each step of the process, making sure that we accurately list and describe the items and are in compliant with the laws of that territory. So there's definitely a few checkpoints where the goods get inspected and unpacked, perhaps, just to view and make sure everything's okay, and then they'll be on their way to the final destination.
The items are there. There's one last thing I can think of, which is sometimes during transportation, things go wrong and we could have damaged units. So how do we deal with some of the items being damaged?
Yeah, it's definitely something that we consider in the planning process. And so what we do, it's pretty simple. We order extra, right? So we have what's called overages, which is usually a percentage, maybe 3 to 5%. Could be more, could be less, depending on the quantity that we're working with. And this makes sure that we have extra units in case of damage, because some of the stuff you really just can't predict, and it is prone to damage during shipping.
Okay, let's talk about some cost-related concerns. So, what are the main variables or factors in the cost of a collector's edition? For example, the quantity we're going to produce. The more we make, we have economies of scale. And the less we make, the higher the price of the unit. But there's other things to consider there. So what affects the cost of the collector's edition?
Yeah, so I think the quantity one is a great one to look at. And a simple example of that is if you want to make 50 of something, but the mold to make that thing is maybe $15,000 or $20,000, you're going to have that cost built into your unit price. So right there you can see how just some fixed costs such as mold or design really can elevate the price of a low quantity collector's edition. But some of the other things I think are choice of material, right? At higher quantities, you get more choice for what the statue is going to be made out of, for example. So picking sort of a heavier, more high quality material can impact that. Same goes for paper stocks when you're looking at the packaging, or whether or not you want a clear acrylic window in the packaging, or extra ribbons, or pull tabs, or even the sleeve that you were talking about earlier, right? So those little additions. And I think also sort of like attention to like smaller detailed things like finishes, right? That's a great example when we're talking about packaging, like spot varnish or gold foil stamping on the outside of the box, or laser cutting out of shape. Those are all awesome to have, but definitely can add up. I think they really contribute to the experience, and we hate to cut them out. But if you're looking to save costs, maybe steer clear of things like that.
You were talking about materials earlier, and I think that's an important subject that comes up every single time.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about making a custom item, whether it's an alarm clock or a figurine of a character, we often get this request like, oh, I want you to 3D print them.
Mm-hmm.
So customers, or a lot of people in general, often are not aware of how mass production works. And so there's different materials we can use. One we hear a lot about is resin.
Mm-hmm.
Resin's often referred to as that heavier material you're referring to. It's often used for more limited run and collectible items. It's commonly thought that the level of detail is superior to other plastics like PVC or ABS. I disagree with that. I think our PVC figurines come out just as nice as the resin ones. But oftentimes we're asked to do lower quantities, and we'll do them in resin. The setup and the tooling charges are lower in
Mm-hmm.
resin than they are in PVC, which is an injection molded plastic, which means there's a $10,000 to $20,000 metal mold that's made and takes a while to make, costs a lot to make. And then PVC pellets, which are just small beads of plastic, are melted and then injected into the mold. And so that's used for higher quantity items. But when we have lower quantity items, we could even do 100 of something in resin, as opposed to PVC, where anything under 3,000 units or 5,000 units becomes less interesting. Do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. So resin, and the other one, polystone, right? Those are those heavier sort of, you think of a collector's statue, like those are commonly used to get this like heavy statue-like effect. And then PVC, as you're describing, once you get into higher quantities, you'll definitely want to consider it because you get more bang for your buck with that mold.
So let's talk about cool collector's editions and maybe some recommendations or some things we'd like to do or like to see more of in the collector's edition world, or even stuff we've seen recently that was done by another company, not by us. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, definitely. So we do see a lot of statues, but I think there are ways to elevate that, and there are a couple, trends that we like and that we'd like to do more of. So one of them is the incorporation of LEDs, right? Like making this thing light up. You could have a little street lamp in your scene and it actually turns on, or having a glowing base or glowing crystal. Like that's a great one. Other interesting things I've seen are use of glow-in-the-dark paint or UV paint. There's a pretty cool one from Dying Light that incorporated that. That was really awesome. And then also interesting use of magnets, something you might not consider, but attaching pieces via magnet or having things hovering via magnet or electromagnetism. We've seen some really great stuff like that recently. So those are just a couple of trends or awesome techniques you can use to elevate just a regular statue.
We did some clear material the other day. I think it was for PUBG, and we ended up using a clear resin and having an LED shine through it. And it was to replicate that closing circle in the battle royale, which is blue.
Yeah.
So that was a neat material to use. We've also done glow in the dark resin for the game Rad, R-A-D. That was for Bandai Namco.
Yeah.
And where we made figurines that would glow in the dark because the character was radioactive and it was post-apocalyptic, and she kind of had a glow to her in the game. And so we ended up using a glow-in-the-dark material, I remember.
Yeah, that was cool. And that one had the retro action figure packaging as well, which was really fun to replicate and work on.
That's in our earlier days, and I remember we made most of them in my garage.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yeah.
It was for an influencer kit, and there wasn't that many units. There weren't that many units, maybe 50 units, I think it was. And we took that old, what's that brand of toys? That typical 1980s brand of toys.
The action figure, it's before my time, I gotta say.
And we ended up buying packaging for existing toys. It might even have been amiibo packaging, if I'm not mistaken. And we ended up repurposing that and reprinting the backer and putting it in there.
The plastic blister on the
that's
front.
right.
So it looked like something you'd see at Toys R Us back in the day.
And the game had an 80s feel to it, and so we used that 80s toy packaging to highlight that part of the game.
That was a great one. And also back to the clear resin or clear materials, we did that on our Elden Ring lamp as well, as a way to make light shine up through the glowing runes. So I think like that combination of part of the statue, and we actually split the 3D model. So we'll like cut it in half, find out where we're gonna make the cut. The one piece is in the clear resin, one piece is regular, and we glue them together. And then light can travel through that, or it can just look like a crystal or sphere or something.
Yeah. The Elden Ring lamp was really cool. The runes had light shining through, and it also had the acrylic plate to represent that glowing message that players leave each other in the game. And I've got it on my bedside. Great item.
Yeah, awesome.
All right, we got to wrap things up. So what is the future of collector's editions in your mind, based on the trends that you're seeing going on right now?
That's definitely a tough question. I think lately, we've been seeing more sort of replica stuff. I mean, there's an awesome Fallout mini fridge I saw recently that looked like it's from the universe, I think. But I think the replicas are a great way to go. God of War did that recently with the axe thing, and I think it's really awesome if you have a game room or if you have a great place to showcase these in your house, feeling like you have something from the world, right? That's always going to be majorly impactful. I don't think figures and character statues are going to go away. I mean, it's an awesome and smaller kind of thing you can have that really speaks to what the game is about and your favorite franchise. But then the one recently that was really generated a lot of hype was the Harry Potter one with the floating wand. So I think introducing more technology into it might be somewhere we see it go, that use a crazy electromagnet to float the wand. And I love the idea of interactive and combination of electronics, maybe using projectors in the statue. That was something that we are experimenting with right now. Can we shoot a laser and have an image projected within our actual statue, on the wall? So I like kind of innovative solutions like that.
For sure. I'd like to see more interactivity to certain sentences that it's programmed to understand. Nothing too Terminator-like or advanced, but something cool that you can interact with and that'll respond to you. All right, Joe. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your expertise, and great side quest sessions.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks for tuning in, you guys. If you think these videos are cool, drop us a like and let us know what you think down below.